delighted to welcome here at the Alma offices in Richmond our author James Wilson, author of The Summer of Broken Stories, which we are publishing in mass market format later this month. Set in an English country village in the 1950s, the book tells the story of an unlikely friendship between a 10-year-old boy called Mark and an eccentric writer called Aubrey, who lives in an old railway carriage. Mark tells his stories from his make-believe world, while Aubrey repays him by telling him about the novel he's writing. But all's not well in Peril on the Swift. The townfolk refuse to accept the presence of this unconventional-looking stranger on the outskirts of the village and began plotting to see him out. What follows is a tale of untold secrets, awkward discoveries, betrayal, the loss of innocence, and the death of illusion. James, the book begins with this extraordinary leap back in time in which history is unraveled and Barratt homes are turned back into fields. How difficult is it when writing a historical novel to divest yourself of the reality you see around yourself, the reality you've grown accustomed to, and summon back a world that is no more?
Well, it's a very interesting question, and the answer for me anyway is absolutely essential. I couldn't, I think, write about a past that I couldn't imagine seeing through my own eyes. And for me, that's one of the reasons why language is very, very important. I feel it's absolutely crucial to capture and use the language that would be appropriate for the time, the language in which those people would have made sense of the world.
You just killed me another 2 or 3 questions
I'm
sorry.
It's okay. We can start again if you want.
You guessed where I was getting.
Okay.
It's the language I'm particularly interested in because, you know, obviously, language last few decades has changed so much. So how do you recreate a language that is plausible without sounding artificially old-fashioned? So that's one of the greatest challenges.
Well, I think essentially the line that I've taken is that you have to find a language that's right, and if people find it old-fashioned, so be it. There's really nothing, because it can only be a real language, a living language, i.e. not pastiche, if you're using it to describe the world just as authentically as you would describe your own language to describe your world. So I have tended to go to great lengths to try to master a language that I felt was right. You know, language is not, as I've just written something about this, language is not a kind of dressing up box where you take a few baubles and drape it over a core of meaning. The fact is the meaning is in the language itself. How we make sense of the world is in the structure of the language. And if you can't get that, you can't actually recapture what the world was like.
Very true. So in the book, you give us an image of a slightly backwards 1950s England with bigoted attitudes towards outsiders, especially nonconformists such as Aubrey. How much do you feel this has changed since then?
Well, I mean, this is kind of just a sort of extension of what we were saying before. Of course, this is the first book I've written where part of what I was reconstructing was something I could remember myself. So this is, and a lot of although the events are fictional and many of the characters are fictional, the kind of emotional core of that story is quite close to my own childhood. So I think what you raise about the attitudes, I would say it's not so much bigotry as a profound unease. There's a lot of fear around, and I think, you know, it's one of the odd things. You know, people think of the 50s as this very smug, conformist period, which was just a kind of, you know, monochrome prelude to the psychedelic 60s. And actually, what I found on my return journey there was this very uneasy world, which was, as they would now say, I think, in denial a great deal about the changes that had happened, and particularly kind of haunted by the shadow of the war, but not able to deal with it. So it wasn't in any way a comfortable world, and I think. I mean, part of the kind of genesis of the book was that actually I think it has much more in common with the world we're in at the moment than at first appears, as a short answer. So there have been huge changes. have been massive changes in terms of, say, class, for instance, particularly in attitudes towards the way that people speak. But I actually think quite a lot of the unease and the fear that was expressed then through things like, you know, the novels of John Wyndham or children's comics are still there today.
Great. And can you tell us a little bit more about the relationship between the boy and Aubrey, a friendship that is based on storytelling and words?
Yes, I mean, my Mark, the protagonist, is a lonely, slightly out of place child who takes refuge in, as you say, an imaginary world that he constructs around his model railway. And essentially that world, the world of Peveril-on-the-Swift, is the kind of idealized version of the village he finds himself living in. It's what that village would like to be like, but it actually isn't. It's full, as I was saying, of anxieties. When he meets Aubrey recognizes this kind of version of an ideal England which Mark has created. And as you say, he offers in return these increasingly dark insights into a world which comes to dominate Mark's imagination. So they both actually, for much of the book, are getting something
and it's
from
the future,
other.
isn't it?
Yeah, it's the future. Yeah, I mean, it's a book about it.
And the future is quite ominous.
He's writing, Aubrey's writing a book about the future. It's a kind of paranoid idea about the way the world is going, which completely overtakes Mark's imagination, so that he sees signs of this world everywhere as he's moving around.
Yes. So what are the roots of your passion for history and historical? You have written,
I've written a lot.
a few novels that are set in the, more or less distant. past.
I've written. I mean, this is my 5th published novel, and they cover between them really the late 18th to the mid 20th century. I think like Mark, I was very obsessed by the past when I was growing up. I kind of felt it around me in a way which I think was probably quite unusual. And I suppose, one way of putting it is that I think if we're to understand where we are today, we have to have a mature understanding of where we come from. And what I've tried to do with a lot of those books, including with this one, is to recreate a truer world for the past than I think actually is found in most historical fiction, to put it bluntly. I think most historical fiction takes a lot of shortcuts and tends to simplify the past, either to make it, this kind of, it's either elegiac, nostalgic, it's about some peaceful world in tune with nature and the seasons and all very simple and pleasant, or it's a world of, bigotry and benighted views that thankfully now we've outgrown. And the truth of the matter is our ancestors were just as complex as we are.
We tend to idealize or
both. I mean, oddly, I think at the moment there's a kind of simultaneous feeling, oh, it was lovely, I'd have loved to have been back then, and thank God we don't think like that anymore.
James, thank you very much for coming to our offices and talking to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's great.
Thanks very much.